By the spring of last year, I had completely flipped the script on my family. Within a matter of weeks, the people who once called me the backbone of our household were left explaining to neighbors, friends, and the entire extended family why their perfect facade had suddenly crumbled. My name became a whisper, then a headline. As news spread first on Facebook, then across group chats and even LinkedIn that Bridget Harper, finance director in Boston, had taken down her own family. But here's what nobody knew: I'd been collecting receipts for years. I'm 32 years old. And for over a decade, I believed I understood what family loyalty meant. My parents raised me in the kind of suburban neighborhood where lawns are always cut, mailboxes match, and holiday lights are a competitive sport. I built my career from scratch, worked late nights, paid my way through college, and, by my late 20s, I was pulling in over $500,000 a year as a finance director at a top Boston firm. But inside that beautiful house, beneath all the birthday cards and Christmas photos, something ugly had been brewing. And it took one night, one so-called family dinner, to make me realize just how deep the betrayal ran. If you've ever been blamed for things that were never your fault, or found yourself giving and giving while others just expected more, I want to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how many of us are out there, quietly holding up the weight of a family that only remembers us when there's a crisis. My story isn't simple. It's about years of sacrifice, of covering for mistakes that weren't mine, of always being the one expected to fix, to pay, to show up. I'm not bitter. Not anymore. But I am honest. And what I'm about to share is for everyone who's ever wondered if it's finally time to put themselves first. From the outside, my family looked picture perfect. My parents were well liked in the community. My brother, Eric, was charming and full of potential, at least according to every adult who ever met him. I was B, the responsible one, the one who always had her act together, the one everyone assumed would land on her feet, no matter how hard she fell. That assumption turned into an excuse, a reason for everyone else to fall apart while I quietly held the pieces. Even now, it amazes me how many warning signs I missed, or maybe just refused to see. My brother got second, third, and fourth chances. I got expectations. He failed upward. I was told to set a good example. And whenever money was short or disaster struck, guess who got the late-night phone call? It wasn't Eric. But here's the thing. You never realize how far someone will push you until the day they finally push too hard. For me, that moment arrived on the night of Eric's engagement dinner. 20 relatives, half the neighborhood, and all eyes on me as my mother leaned in, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If you can't help your brother, don't come home again." The whole table went quiet. Even Eric stopped scrolling through his phone. That was the moment something shifted. I didn't cry. Didn't argue. I just looked back at my mother and thought, not this time. What they didn't know was, I'd been preparing for this. Every Venmo transfer, every Zelle payment, every email about hospital bills and car loans, I had it all. For years, I told myself it was just to stay organized. Now, I realized it was my insurance policy. So, if you're listening to this and thinking, that's my family, trust me, you are not alone. And if you've ever wondered what would happen if you finally said enough, stick around, because that's exactly what I did. Let me take you back to where it really began. Before that dinner, before the final straw, when I still believed family was worth any sacrifice. Looking back now, it's easy to see how the sacrifice started so small it felt almost invisible. I was 18, fresh out of high school. And while Eric was busy being the golden child, everyone's favorite, Always the center of attention, I was figuring out how to pay for college without putting anyone else out. My parents always said, "You'll be fine. B. You're resourceful." And I was. I took on 2 part-time jobs every semester, studied late into the night, and watched Eric coast by on a wave of last-minute excuses and parental bailouts. When Eric dropped out of his private college after just 3 semesters, tuition fully paid by our parents, no one really blamed him. They said he was finding himself. Meanwhile, I was grinding through community college classes, transferring to state university, and never once asking for help. By the time I turned 22, I'd already developed a habit of handling everything myself. No questions asked. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a financial firm downtown. My starting salary was $80,000 a year, something I was proud of. Though my parents liked to say it was just the beginning, they bragged about me to everyone at church. But whenever Eric came home with another failed side hustle, a DJ business one month, then a health coaching gig, then something about becoming a Twitch streamer, somehow the family rallied to support him. I was the safety net, the silent partner in every rescue operation. The pattern just kept repeating. Whenever Eric made a mistake, it was normal. He's still young. When I was tired or overwhelmed, I was told I was too serious, not fun enough, or just a little dramatic. Every time a crisis hit, car trouble, medical bills, a rent check that didn't clear, I got the late-night call. One year, when I was 26, my mother was diagnosed with a chronic illness. The bills added up fast. First, it was $5,000 for initial tests, then $20,000 for surgery, then another $20,000 for rehab. And before I knew it, the total had ballooned to over $180,000 across 4 years. I didn't hesitate. Every time a bill came in, I paid it, sometimes before my parents even asked. They called me the family angel. I told myself I was just doing my duty. Eric's problems didn't go away. At one point, he called me from Miami and told me he needed to invest in himself to really break through as an influencer. My parents pleaded with me to help. It'll mean so much for him. B. Just one more push. Against my better judgment, I used my annual bonus to buy him a car, a brand new Porsche. $140,000. Wired directly from my account. He posted it on Instagram with a caption that said, "Success is a mindset." 6 months later, the car was gone, sold for cash. No explanation. I kept records of everything, not out of resentment, but because I needed to see where my money was actually going. I saved every Venmo transfer, every Zelle receipt, and every email about medical payments or emergency loans. I wasn't suspicious then, I just didn't want to forget how much I'd contributed. But that spreadsheet became my lifeline. Still, it wasn't just about the money. Every time I wanted to focus on my career, or maybe take a new job in another city, my parents reminded me how much they relied on me. "You're the glue. B. Eric needs you here. We need you." So I stayed. I turned down a promotion in New York City because they needed me at home, just in case. Looking back, I see it for what it was: years of quiet expectation, a slow bleed. My parents took my help for granted. And Eric, well, Eric barely noticed. He was always on the verge of a breakthrough, always one big idea away from making us all proud. I told myself he'd grow up. I thought if I just helped one more time, he'd finally stand on his own. But he never did. As time went on, the asks got bigger. Rent became mortgage payments. Car repairs turned into car purchases. Medical bills never really ended, just changed form. It was $48,000 a year for my parents. Another $20,000 here. $10,000 there. And every time, my parents promised, just until things turn around. Meanwhile, family gatherings always had the same script. My parents would boast about Eric's potential, downplay his mistakes, and laugh off his failures. If I tried to talk about my work, the conversation drifted back to Eric, his next big project, his latest adventure, his string of bad luck. The longer it went on, the more invisible I became. I was a background character in my own life, always there to fix what was broken, never the reason anyone celebrated. That's the story I lived for over a decade. I thought it was normal, just family. But as you'll see, it was setting me up for a kind of betrayal I never saw coming. And it all came to a head on the night my family decided I'd finally outlived my usefulness. If I'm honest, I wish I could say the betrayal hit me all at once. That would have been easier. Maybe even a little less humiliating. But the truth is, it arrived slowly. Like a slow leak you don't notice until the basement's already flooded. The hints were everywhere, I just needed to put them together. It started with a change in the family group chat. For years, it had just been me, my parents, and Eric. Then my mom began adding cousins, aunts, and even a few people from church. Suddenly, everything felt more performative. If Eric posted a vacation selfie or mentioned a new business plan, there would be an outpouring of encouragement, dozens of clapping hand emojis, endless praise. Whenever he needed a favor, I was the one tagged B. Can you help your brother B? You're so generous. No one ever asked if I was okay. That winter, things escalated. I was buried in year-end reports at work when Eric's Instagram lit up with photos from Miami. Expensive hotels, luxury dinners, and a new gold watch that probably cost more than my first car. Meanwhile, back in Boston, my parents texted me. Can you help us with rent just for this month? B. I began to wonder where all the money was actually going. My parents' bills seemed to rise and fall at odd intervals, never quite matching what I transferred. I pulled up my spreadsheet. Every payment was there, line by line. When I totaled everything for the year, it was nearly $48,000. That didn't count Eric's emergencies, which by that point had already added up to another $50,000. The unease grew when my best friend Callie called me one night. She sounded worried, her voice tight. She'd stumbled across a Facebook thread where someone accused Eric of running a giveaway scam, buying followers, reselling gift cards, promising prizes that never arrived. At first, I wanted to believe it was just internet drama. But the more I read, the more I saw my family's fingerprints on every excuse. A week later, I got a call from Eric, his tone desperate and rushed. He needed just a little help. He said, "It's urgent. B. I'll pay you back as soon as my next deal closes." I wanted to say no, but my parents jumped in, too. With a joint text, Eric's had a rough month. If you could help, you know it would mean everything. He hesitated, then pulled up my master folder. Every Venmo and Zelle payment, every loan, every so-called emergency was right there. The numbers didn't lie. That was the moment I stopped making excuses for everyone else. Looking back, I can see the breadcrumbs I missed. There were nights when my mom would text me about a hospital bill, then post photos at a spa the next day. Or times when Eric would need $1,000 for rent, then flash front row concert tickets online. Each incident on its own was easy to dismiss, but taken together, the pattern was impossible to ignore. The real turning point came in the lead up to Eric's engagement dinner, a big family milestone my parents insisted I host. My mother said, "Everyone looks up to you. B. It would mean so much if you made the night special." I spent weeks planning the menu, booking a caterer, and arranging flowers, paying for it all. Of course, out of my own pocket. As the day approached, my anxiety grew. Group chat messages multiplied. Relatives I barely spoke to started dropping hints. So excited to see what B's put together. Eric's so lucky to have a sister like you. Even Eric texted, "Don't go overboard. B. Keep it simple this time." That stung more than I'd admit. Then, the night of the dinner finally arrived. My house filled up with more than 20 people, family, neighbors, even a few of Eric's influencer friends. The evening started like every other family event: laughter, small talk, my parents bragging about Eric's latest idea. But as I moved between the kitchen and dining room, I overheard snippets of conversation. B's the reason Eric can keep going. If it wasn't for her, who knows where they'd be. Some comments were meant as compliments, but they felt more like reminders of my role. After dessert, I caught a conversation between my parents and Eric. Low voices just out of earshot. My mother said, "It's time she steps up again. Eric needs her support." My dad replied, "She'll do it, she always does. She wouldn't dare embarrass us in front of everyone." Eric just laughed. That was it. The weight of a decade crashed down in that moment. Suddenly, every missed vacation, every canceled plan, every dollar I'd ever given made perfect sense. This wasn't just a one-off ask. It was a system, a game where I was always the bank, and everyone else kept score. It was that night, in a room full of people celebrating Eric's future, that I realized I'd been written out of my own life. And that realization changed everything. That night, I barely slept. The dinner party was over, but the feeling of being cornered stayed with me long after the last guest left. I replayed every conversation in my mind, especially those whispers I caught between my parents and Eric. For the first time, I allowed myself to see the pattern for what it was: a long-running, carefully orchestrated setup where I was always the solution, never the priority. The surface betrayal was obvious now. I realized that my family's so-called gratitude was just another tool to keep me compliant. I had paid for everything: Eric's emergencies, my parents' bills, even the entire engagement dinner, while they quietly complained behind my back that I wasn't doing enough. And in front of our relatives, my mother had the nerve to toast Eric as the glue that keeps this family together. While I stood off to the side, practically invisible, that moment stung in a way I can't quite describe. It wasn't just about being overlooked. It was about being deliberately excluded from my own family's story. But as I went through the texts and bank statements later that night, the deeper conspiracy came into focus. I found group chat messages where my parents coordinated exactly how and when to ask me for money, sometimes scripting their requests down to the last detail. I read emails between Eric and my mother about which lies would work best. Tell her it's for medical bills, she always helps when it's about health. It hit me that they had been manipulating me for years, not just in moments of desperation, but with calculated precision. Then came the pattern recognition, the realization that this wasn't a bad month or a series of unfortunate choices. It was a lifestyle built on my reliability. Every time Eric failed, my parents rushed to cover for him, knowing I'd quietly pick up the pieces. Every financial emergency was a well-rehearsed performance, delivered to keep me locked in my role as the fixer. In that moment, I felt overwhelmed, like my chest was tight, my thoughts racing. I noticed the details around me: the cold kitchen counter under my hands, the hum of the refrigerator, the stack of catering receipts still sitting in my purse. Out the window, the city lights of Boston glowed, indifferent to the drama unfolding in my life. For a moment, I just stood there, realizing how deeply I had let these people dictate my choices. I thought about the years I'd spent putting off my own dreams, turning down promotions, missing vacations, and paying for things no one else seemed to value. It was as if I'd been programmed to say yes, over and over, while they quietly planned the next ask. Suddenly, all the hints, all the little moments, every B. You're our only hope. Every Eric just needs a little more time. Every unexplained expense snapped into place. I could see the game for what it was. And I knew then that it would never end unless I made it end. That was the night I promised myself I would never be put in that position again. What came next was not rage or tears, but a calm, almost icy clarity. I was done being the backup plan. It was time for a new script, one where I finally chose myself. That new sense of clarity didn't make me angry, it made me focused. For the first time in years, I saw my family's tactics not as accidents but as strategy. And if they could play the long game, so could I. The very next morning, I started by organizing every shred of evidence. I pulled out my laptop and created a master folder. Every Venmo transaction, every Zelle payment, every email and screenshot, hundreds of files went into digital order. I printed out statements, highlighted the transfers, and added notes with dates and who had requested what. It was all right there, black and white. The numbers told the story better than I ever could. After years of being told I was too responsible, I was about to show them exactly how responsible I could be. My first call was to my bank. I explained that I needed to freeze the joint account I'd been using to cover my mother's medical bills. The representative asked why. And for the first time, I told the truth: financial exploitation by family. She didn't sound surprised. By noon, the account was frozen, and all automatic payments stopped. Next, I logged into every payment app: Venmo, Zelle, even PayPal, and canceled every recurring transfer to my parents and to Eric. I double-checked my credit report for any unauthorized accounts. That's when I saw it: Eric had used my credit to open a new account just 3 months earlier. Maxed out. Never paid. I reported the fraud right away and filed an official complaint. Then I flagged the Porsche I'd purchased for Eric for repossession. Since the car was in my name, it only took a few signatures and a phone call. I called my best friend Callie and told her everything. She showed up that night with a bottle of wine and a yellow legal pad. We sat at my dining table, going through every text message, every social media post, every emergency story I'd heard over the years. For hours, we built a timeline documenting exactly when and how the money had disappeared, and who had asked for what. It was almost clinical, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. The next day, I scheduled meetings. I called my attorney first, explained the years of financial pressure, and presented all the receipts. He listened, occasionally shaking his head, then walked me through every step I could take: file for fraud, send cease and desist letters, start the process for identity theft protection, and notify the credit bureaus. At work, I met with HR. I wanted them to be aware, just in case my family tried to escalate their drama to my professional life, which, honestly, wouldn't have surprised me. I forwarded a package of evidence, explained I was taking legal action, and asked for their support. They promised confidentiality and offered resources for financial abuse victims. For the first time, I felt like someone was truly on my side, but I didn't stop there. I sent a formal email to my parents, and Eric copied to the extended family and our church group, laying out the facts effective immediately. I was ending all financial support, reporting all unauthorized transactions, and beginning legal proceedings if necessary. I attached a summary of payments and receipts, and I made sure the message was clear but unemotional. There would be no more late-night calls, no more surprise bills, and no more pretending I was just helping out. To protect myself, I backed up every file to cloud storage and created a private thread on Reddit with the full story and documents. Just in case anyone in the family tried to spin a new narrative, I even scheduled a consultation with a financial investigator to ensure nothing had slipped through the cracks. Through it all, I kept my composure. I didn't lash out or threaten. I simply documented, prepared, and executed each step like a project at work. If my family saw me as their safety net, they were about to learn what happened when the net disappeared. I didn't know what their reaction would be. But for the first time, it didn't matter. I was no longer the fixer. I was finally taking my life back. The days after I hit send on that email were some of the most surreal of my life. At first, there was total silence, almost as if everyone in the family was holding their breath, waiting for me to come to my senses. But I didn't flinch. Not even a little. I stood my ground, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. Then, the storm broke. Eric's first move was to go public. Just as I'd predicted, he blasted out a long, emotional post on Facebook, tagging half the family and even a few of my old friends from high school. He accused me of abandoning him and painted himself as a victim who had done nothing but love his family. He ended his post by asking, "Who turns their back on their own blood for a little money?" That question stung. But not for the reasons he thought. In the comments, a few people jumped to defend him, but most read the attached thread, my careful summary of all the transfers, payments, and receipts, and simply stayed quiet. My parents, on the other hand, tried to keep things private at first. They called, left long voicemails, and sent texts that shifted from pleading to angry in the space of a single afternoon. My mother's messages started with, "B. We love you. Just call us back." But by the end of the week, she was threatening to expose me to our church community and claiming I'd left them destitute. My father tried a softer approach. "We're family. B. Can't we work this out like adults?" But I knew now those words were just another lever they used when the other tactics failed. It didn't take long for the real consequences to start rolling in. First, the Porsche Eric had been flaunting on social media vanished. The repo truck came right up our old driveway and towed it away in broad daylight. A neighbor caught the whole thing on video and posted it online. Eric tried to laugh it off, but the embarrassment was impossible to hide. The joint bank account, now frozen, started bouncing all my parents' automatic payments. Suddenly, they had to explain to the mortgage company, the utility providers, even their favorite takeout place, why the money was no longer coming through. My attorney, a calm woman with the patience of a saint, sent out cease and desist letters to both Eric and my parents, making it clear that any attempt to contact my workplace or interfere with my reputation would lead to legal action. For the first time, the power had shifted. But the most powerful moment came when my extended family began reaching out to me. One by one. A cousin in Chicago texted, "B? I just saw everything. I'm so sorry. If you ever need support, let me know." An aunt who'd always played neutral wrote, "I wish I'd understood sooner. You don't deserve any of this." I didn't reply to everyone, but I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer alone. Meanwhile, Eric's so-called influencer business collapsed overnight. Word got around about the giveaway scam, and the companies he'd been courting dropped him fast. His LinkedIn profile was flagged. His brand partnerships disappeared. And, within a month, he was posting stories about starting over. His reputation as the golden child was gone, replaced by a kind of quiet shame that followed him everywhere. My parents didn't fare much better. The church, once so eager to praise our family, quietly asked them to step back from their volunteer roles until things settled down. Friends stopped inviting them to dinners. Neighbors, who'd once smiled and waved, now looked the other way. Of course, they tried to rally. I got one last group text, this time from my mother begging me to reconsider. She wrote, "We're still your parents. We still love you. Don't let a little money ruin everything we built." But by then, it was too late. The money wasn't the issue. The issue was respect, trust, and the simple truth that family doesn't mean endless sacrifice from just one person. Even after all that, I remained dignified. I didn't fight back on social media. I didn't show up at their door demanding an apology. I simply stuck to my plan, kept my boundaries firm, updated my passwords, and made sure every legal base was covered. I let the facts speak for themselves. The immediate aftermath was lonely, but it was also the most peaceful silence I'd experienced in years. The weight that had followed me for so long, the pressure to always say yes, to always fix, to always give, finally started to lift. And for the first time, I realized I was free. Life after the fallout was quieter than I expected. There were no more frantic calls in the middle of the night. No more surprise bills or last-minute emergencies. At first, the silence felt strange. Even lonely. I'd spent so many years wrapped up in someone else's crisis that I barely knew what to do with my own freedom. For a while, I'd catch myself waiting for the next disaster. Phone in hand, half expecting another text from Eric or my parents, but it never came. As the weeks passed, the peace started to feel real. I bought a small condo in the Seaport district, a bright, open space with views of the Boston skyline, and enough sunlight to make even the longest winter feel shorter. For the first time in my life, every piece of furniture, every mug in the kitchen, every picture on the wall belonged to me alone. There were no reminders of debt. No photos of family dinners I had paid for. No old receipts tucked into drawers. Just my life. On my own terms. Work felt different too. Without the constant distraction of family drama, I found myself more focused, more creative, more present in every meeting. My consulting business grew quickly. In the first year alone, I closed more than $300,000 in new contracts, money I could finally spend however I wanted. Instead of bailing out relatives, I took a real vacation. Traveled to California. Spent a week hiking in the mountains and actually felt rested for the first time in years. Holidays became something to look forward to, not a source of stress. My best friend Callie and I started new traditions: Thanksgiving dinners with friends, Christmas parties that ended in board games and laughter, birthdays where the only expectation was to have fun. I realized that family didn't have to mean blood ties. Sometimes, the people who show up for you, who celebrate your wins, comfort your losses, and never ask for more than you can give, are the family you get to choose. Eric, as far as I know, drifted from one odd job to another, moving to a smaller city and keeping a lower profile online. My parents sold the house and downsized. No longer the stars of the neighborhood. I heard through an aunt that things were quiet for them too. But they never reached out again, not really. There were no grand apologies. No sudden admissions of guilt. Just distance. For a long time, I wondered if I'd regret the choice I made. I'd spent my entire adult life believing that family was forever. That love meant giving until it hurt. But all that did was teach the people around me to expect more. To take without ever thinking to give back. It wasn't until I finally said no, finally walked away, that I learned what love actually looks like. Now, I have people in my life who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. I'm respected at work, cherished by friends, and for the first time, truly proud of the life I've built. Sometimes, I still feel a pang of sadness for what might have been, but it's always outweighed by the freedom and dignity I've gained. So if you're listening to this and wondering if it's ever okay to put yourself first, let me say this: it is. It's not selfish to set boundaries. It's not cruel to protect your peace. You get one life, and you deserve to live it on your own terms. Have you ever had to choose your own well-being over your family's expectations? How did you find the courage to walk away? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment and let's support each other. And if this story resonated with you, hit subscribe. There are more stories coming, stories about healing, about boundaries, about choosing yourself, even when it's hard, because sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into, and that, in the end, is the best kind of freedom.